for WordCamp Vancouver, and he is going to talk to us about the REST API within WordPress and Jetpack. So everyone give a big hand to Joey.
Thank you, Flynn. Hi, everybody. So my friend and coworker Kirk, who's sitting right there, went to a conference about, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and it was kind of like an SEO thing, and they kept like throwing around this term called the API economy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's the API economy on the Internet of Things. No, not really, but I am going to talk about what an API is, how it works within WordPress, the different types of APIs, because there's a few different ones and a little bit of confusion within the WordPress community at the moment. And I'll show you how to build a kind of a basic application, as well as show you some other examples that you can browse in your own time. Been told I have to speak a little louder. So just to get a quick idea, like how many of you would consider yourselves developers on a day-to-day basis? Great, almost everybody. Sweet. And all these slides that I'm showing you here are available on this URL as well. And I'm told that this is being recorded, so it'll be on YouTube and on the Internet of Things after. So WordPress can be used as an application platform. You've probably heard this by now. I think Matt Mullenweg, who's the leader of WordPress, has mentioned that in his State of the Word keynote for the last 3 or 4 years. So I think we're finally at the point where we can actually call WordPress an application platform, because you don't need to load all of WordPress to actually build an application or something that interacts with the data that's within your WordPress. You can actually use WordPress just as your data layer and use something completely custom as the interaction or UI layer, which is kind of cool. So why would you want to do this? Well, a lot of use cases are like WordPress originally was meant as a blogging platform, and then more as a CMS. You would make pages with it, or blogs, or maybe you'd have custom post types to manage some kind of custom data hierarchy. But it's as like clients and various companies want to build more and more complex applications, it's becoming increasingly difficult to do that just as a theme within WordPress. And a lot of people resort to using WordPress as just the place where all the data lives and all the content is entered in, but then use something completely custom for users to interact with on the front end. And that's an increasingly popular way of doing things. And it has a lot of advantages. It's usually faster than loading a custom theme, and it allows you to create more custom and more immersive experiences than you could with a regular theme. So I'll focus primarily on the REST API that exists in WordPress.com and Jetpack. So anybody with a Jetpack site can actually use this API. And the site where you gather all the information about this is, this one, developer.wordpress.com. And what we're going to focus on is the REST API. So what is the API exactly? It's basically a JSON RESTful API. That means that all the data that is sent to it and sent back to you is done via the JSON like data format, which makes it very easy to work with. I don't know if some of you have worked with XML before, but that's kind of like more complicated and more annoying to work with. JSON makes it really easy to interact with, and most programming languages, PHP included, have easy ways to interact with JSON, which is really nice. It allows you to integrate data and features from WordPress into any of your applications. It works with any language or platform, as I said, that can make HTTP requests. So basically any programming language, or almost any, is compatible with the REST API, which is nice. So you're not limited to building sites with just PHP or JavaScript. You can basically use any language you want, whatever you're comfortable with. And it works with WordPress.com and Jetpack-enabled self-hosted sites. And that feature has existed in Jetpack since version 1.9. We're now at version 3.0.2, so it's been in there for quite a while. For authentication, it uses OAuth 2, and some of the information in it is queryable without authentication. So anything that you would be able to access normally on a WordPress site without having to log in, you will be able to do the same thing with the API. So for example, if you have a site that's public, that's not private in any way, and you're trying to just fetch the posts on that site, you'll be able to do that without requiring any kind of authentication. On the other hand, if you're trying to do an admin-related action like change the theme or create a new post or something like that, then you'll be required to be logged in. And one nice thing that that's kind of granted for free when you create an application through the WordPress.com and Jetpack API is you get automatic insights. So you'll get to know how many people are using your application, the number of requests that are being made with it, and all of basically a bunch of statistics about it that are included through a dashboard, which I'll demonstrate later on as well. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with the API. There's, I don't know the exact number, but there's definitely well over 25 different endpoints. And within the endpoints, there's sub-endpoints and query parameters that you can pass. So there's quite a lot that you can do, some of which is collecting user information, site metadata, creating, editing, finding, reblogging, and viewing posts. You can create, edit, find, and view comments. You can search and find related posts. And you can interact with taxonomies. You can do stuff with media, with likes. So via Jetpack and WordPress.com, you have a like button, so you can actually create a like dynamically as well. You can interact with WordPress.com's freshly pressed and reader sections. You can work with notifications, with WordPress.com stats, and as well, you can actually gather the insights that your app creates through the same API, which is kind of neat. If you wanted to get that information back into your own dashboard somehow or something like that. And we've added a lot to the API in the last few months. So if it's been, I don't know, 6, 7 months or a year or something like that since the last time that you've looked at it and thought, oh, this won't really suit my needs, you might actually want to take another look at it because a lot of the stuff in there has been improved. And our goal with it is that anything you can do in WP admin, you should be able to do through the REST API. So our goal is to kind of make everything feature agnostic. So anything that you're traditionally been able to do in WP admin, you should be also able to do through the API and more as well. In case you're wondering who's actually using this, quite a few people are, which is kind of nice. So the WordPress iOS and Google Play apps use it internally. So if you have a Jetpack site or a WordPress.com site and you connect that through the iOS or Android app, it'll actually use the REST API to communicate back with your site. There's an kind of old Windows 8 application that uses it. It doesn't do that much. You can actually only read content through it, but it's kind of a neat experience. And it was one of the first applications that we had built with the API, so it's worth checking out as well. On WordPress.com, we have this interface that we call the Reader, where you can, it's kind of like what Google Reader used to be. You can read both WordPress sites and external feeds through it. And this is powered internally all by the REST API as well. PAF, the iOS and Android PAF apps, allow you to post back to WordPress, and they use the REST API to publish that way. Clout uses WordPress to gather statistics about your site and see how influential you are. Pocket uses WordPress, so you can share back to WordPress and create a post on your blog if there's an article that you like. IFTTT, the if this then that, integrates with WordPress. And currently, actually, it would be a little bit of a lie to say that they use the REST API because they actually use the old XML RPC integration. But we're working with them at the moment to update that to the REST API integration, and you'll be able to do more things with it, which is kind of nice. So imagine a scenario where every time you publish a photo to Instagram, it'll automatically publish it to WordPress. You can do that with IFTTT, and that will use the REST API in the background. So you're probably interested about how you can actually use this in your applications or whatever integration you want to do. So I'll explain a little bit how it works. We're going to start with creating an application on the developer site. So you would go to the My Apps screen, which is at this URL. And by the way, this is kind of like not really a workshop because we're not like actively building something, but workshop format. So if you don't understand something or have a question, just raise your hand and we'll take care of it. We don't have to do this super formal thing. I'd like for there to be a little bit of interaction. So once I'm here, I can then click the Create New Application button, fill out some basic information, the name of my application, the description, the URL that explains what my application does, a redirect URL, which is where your users will be sent after they've logged in, and then the type of application. You can either choose web or native, and the main difference between those is a web is basically a server-to-server application, whereas a native is one that's only client-side. So it basically depends whether you can store the client secret, which I'll explain what that is, privately without divulging it in the clear to the user or not. And that'll give you basically two different types of integrations. Though they work the exact same, once you have it set up, it's just that you have to integrate the authentication slightly differently, depending on the type of application you choose. So once you've created your application, you'll get a screen like this, where you'll have a lot of information about your app, some things that you can do on the side, and this section, which is kind of important, which shows you the client ID and the client secret, both of which you're going to use for authentication purposes. So we're going to save those and write them down somewhere. If you're creating a server-to-server application, then you would save those like in a config file or an environment variable or something like that. I did a similar presentation at WordCamp Auto and forgot to update the URL here. So once we have that stored, we can do authentication via OAuth 2. And we're going to use the authorization code grant type. This page explains how it works, but I'll go in detail here as well. So there's two endpoints that you need to know about. The first one is /OAuth2/authorize and /OAuth2/token. The first step that we're going to do is basically have a button on our page or some kind of way for the user to start the authentication process. So whether you use a button, a pop-up, a model, something, you're going to need to redirect the user to this URL, which is basically just the authorize URL with your client ID and your redirect URL appended to that URL. The user is going to go there. They're going to log into their WordPress.com account, and then they'll be redirected back to your site, basically exchanging authentication that way. This is what the OAuth screen will look like. So you're logging in. You get to choose which site you want to authorize the application to access. And this will give you both any WordPress.com sites and any Jetpack connected sites that you have on your account. In return, you're going to get a code. So once you're redirected back to your app, you get this code. And that code will basically allow you to further with every request, further authenticate the user. And we're going to save that code and get the authorization code. So here I'm doing it as a curl request, but you could do this in any other way that you have of submitting an HTTP request. So this time you're trying to get an authorization token. So the URL is OAuth2/token. You pass it the client ID, again the redirect URI, grant type, and this time you're giving it your client secret and executing the curl request. In return, you're going to get an access token, a blog ID, the blog URL, and the token type, which is always, in this case, going to be a bearer. So now we're going to save that for the user somewhere, either as a cookie, a session storage. Maybe you want to save it in the database. Depends on what kind of application you're building. So now we're authenticated, and we can actually do some fun stuff and query the API for some data. So the first kind of really basic API call that you can do is to the /me endpoint. And I should say every request that you make is going to be done to this URL, public API.wordpress.com and /rest. And then most endpoints are still at v1, so it'll be at v1. As we add new stuff to the API, it's possible that we add a different version to the API. So I'll explain how to keep in touch with the latest stuff as well. And so you're going to this, you're going to query this /me endpoint, and it's going to give you back some data about the user. This is a quick example of how you would make that request again as a curl request. So you're basically just passing this extra header with authorization bearer and then the access token that we got from the last request that we made, and then passing that to this endpoint, getting a response, JSON decoding it, and you'll get this nice little object of information about the user. And what you get here is the WordPress.com ID of the user, their display name, username, email, the ID of their primary blog, their avatar URLs, and some meta links for how to get additional information about the user and their sites. So now that we've done that, let's do something a little more fun where we can actually query and see what theme a site is using. I got this site ID from over here. So this is my primary blog at jkudish.com. And I can query the site's endpoint and then the theme's sub endpoint and see which theme I'm currently running. And so I get back this object with the name of the theme, screenshot. If it was a paid theme, I would get the price as well. Gives you the version, the download URL, which you can actually go and get as a zip then, some rank information about how well it ranks in the WordPress.com theme repository. So it's kind of neat. But so far, all we've done is just gather some information. So what we're going to do now is actually go and change the theme. And since we're authenticated as an administrator on the site, we can actually do that. So it's going to be the same endpoint that we used last time, but instead of doing a GET request, this time we're doing a POST. And here I'm giving you an example of how you would do this from the command line instead of from PHP. So again, you're hitting that endpoint and passing in as the data parameter the name of the theme that you want to change it to, so 2013 in this case. And you would also pass in some information about authentication, which I've removed just for the sake of this example. And as a response, you would either get a false, which means the theme didn't succeed at changing, or you would get the theme object back. And in this case, that's what we got. So we got 2013 back, meaning that the theme was successfully changed on the site. The cool thing about this API is Jetpack just works. You don't need to do anything special. You can just activate the JSON API module, which is auto-activated by default, and it'll just work. As I mentioned before, Jetpack sites show up in the OAuth dialog, so you don't have to do anything special for that to just work. Just like a WordPress.com site, Jetpack sites will get an ID, so you can interact with it either by the URL or by the ID. Some of the endpoints are actually specific either just to Jetpack or just to WordPress.com, so watch out for that. That's one of the gotchas about using the API. So things like reblogging are not supported on Jetpack, so you won't be able to use that. And one other important distinction is the me endpoint always return information about the WordPress.com user, not about the local user. So you know how if you have a Jetpack site, you connect that to a WordPress.com account. So any API calls that are made that return some information about the user will return the information about the WordPress.com user, not about the local user on the WordPress.org installation. There's a lot of documentation available on how to use the API. And to see that, you can go to developer.wordpress.com/docs, and then it's kind of organized by endpoints and by authentication. And there's a cool console that you can use that doesn't require you to do any of the authentication flow if you just want to play with the API and see what some of the responses are and see how you can use this in your own applications. There's a link from the developer homepage, but it's /docs/API/console. And here you get all the endpoints on the side, and you just fill in some information that you want to query, and it gives you the results in a nice, easy to read and easy to parse format on the side, which is really nice. One quick trick that a lot of people don't know and this isn't specific to the console, it actually is like a Chrome developer trick, is if you have the console open while making any HTTP requests, in this case, while I'm doing the request here of getting me, if I have the network tab in my console open, I can actually select that HTTP request and copy it as curl, and then I can go and paste that into terminal and execute the request again if I need to. So it's a nice way of kind of quickly getting the curl command that you would want to execute without actually trying to think about how to create it yourself, which is really handy for quick debugging or to understand how a request is formed or something like that. And this console that I just showed you is completely open source. So you can go and download it yourself, run it yourself if you don't want to run it on the WordPress.com site. We also, of course, welcome contributions for that. And it's on GitHub. As I mentioned earlier, there's a Insights dashboard. So if you have an application registered with us, you would get this nice dashboard showing you how much your API is used. So you get an overall count of API calls, you get the number of posts created, and you get kind of a breakdown of API reads and API writes. And then depending on the different things that your application will do, we'll give you different tabs here for the different integrations that you might have going on with WordPress.com and Jetpack sites. So it'll give you a nice idea of how your app is being used, kind of similar to if you create an application on Facebook or Twitter or something like that. They also give you stats and how many users you have and how many API requests you're making. And you can also filter this down to daily, weekly, monthly, cumulative stats. You can look at start and end dates, look at a particular set in time. And you can also export this as a CSV if you need to do it somewhere or take that data somewhere else. And you can actually query this data with the API itself as well, which is neat. A quick note on custom post types and metadata. If you're a WordPress.com VIP customer, which I don't believe any of you in the room are, but at some events that I speak at, there sometimes are. Or if you use Jetpack, you can use custom post types through the REST API as well as custom metadata. We have a post on the developer site that explains how to interact with it, but it's pretty basic. You just register the post types that you want to support through this filter, and then any metadata keys that you want to use with this filter. So pretty basic. We have a whitelist approach as opposed to a blacklist approach. So if you're a developer and you want to integrate custom post types and custom metadata, you have to tell the API that you want that to work. By default, we just default to posts and pages and no custom metadata. So a lot of you might be building single-page JavaScript applications. And for a long time, that wasn't really possible with the REST API. But as of about a month ago, we've added implicit OAuth and CORS, so cross-domain origin requests, into the API. So now it is actually possible to create a fully fledged JavaScript client-side only application and do all of your API requests through AJAX, which is really neat. A couple pointers: the implicit OAuth token that you get only lasts about a day. So at the moment, users do have to re-authenticate on a daily basis. It's something we're looking at changing. We just want to see how people are using the implicit OAuth, and we're kind of like beta testing it in the wild a little bit. And if the adoption is good, we'll definitely increase that threshold. And for core support, that basically means that you have to, when you're setting up your application, you have to tell it which URLs you're going to use it from. That's basically a way to make sure that someone isn't trying to use your tokens and your client ID on a bad website or a website that you don't allow. So it's basically a security feature to make sure that only the domains that you specify are using your client ID and client secret. We have a nice documentation page that kind of explains how this works. So a very quick basic example is this. I don't know if you can see it very well. I don't think I can zoom in, but basically you could do an AJAX request to the same URLs of any endpoint. And if it's a non-authenticated request, it'll just work. If it's an authenticated request, you just have to pass in the authorization code as a header. It's very simple. I don't know why this is broken, but it's OK, because I'm actually going to demo this a little bit. So last month, the team that I work on at Automatic and I created a kind of a demo application called Sulfur, which is basically a media manager built with Backbone.js and does all the interactions through JavaScript. And it's solely a demo app. We are not going to try to use it for anything, but it demonstrates how you can actually work with JavaScript and the API. And the application is actually running in production. You can go and play with it on this Heroku instance. So you get this nice landing page and connect to your site. And then once you're connected, it'll load all the media from your blog and allow you to upload new media and view details about your media items. And the code here is all open source, so you can actually go and play with it and install it and see how we did this integration. Oops. I'll show you real quick how we make authenticated requests. It's actually really simple. All we do is every time we make an AJAX request, before sending it, we append the authorization header with the access token that we got when we authenticated. That's all that's needed to do authenticated requests. And then in my Backbone collections or models, I can just do a regular, like I can just do the regular Backbone syntax of using a URL and doing a fetch, and it'll automatically work, which is really cool. Is that clear to everybody, kind of? There's a few integrations that we've kind of simplified with the REST API. If you don't need to use all of the features in the REST API, these are kind of helpers for either interacting with the API or just basically a subset of it. So if you just want authentication, so you have an application and you don't want to create your own user system, you could use Facebook Connect or Twitter Connect. Well, you can also use WordPress.com Connect. So it's a simple button that you add to your site with like a few lines of JavaScript, and it'll allow any user to authenticate, and you'll get the user object and be able to basically have a user system without having to create your own, which is pretty handy in some cases. If you just want a follow button, so like a button for users to follow your blog, either because you want to include that somewhere else or within your blog itself, you can go here and create your own. It'll give you a nice little interface for creating it, and then the button will look like this, and you'll just have a quick like 3 lines of code that you can copy to your site as well. And this one is one of my favorite small integrations. It's an embeddable timeline. So you get either a black or a white kind of timeline of all your blog posts. So if you have, let's say, like a company website, and then your blog is somewhere else, or you're trying to promote a blog of a different company or something like that, you can just include the latest post through this like kind of handy widget. So what's next for the REST API? More endpoints. As I said before, everything you can do with WP admin, you should be able to do from the API. So we'll add things like changing blog settings, and like basically anything you can do in WP admin, you should be able to do with the API. We're going to try to do more how-tos and sample apps like Sulfur so that it becomes easier and easier for people to integrate. And I'm kind of going to bounce back at the end here as well to see what you guys want to see in the API. Like if you're building single-page applications or trying to build or use WordPress as an application framework, what's missing for you? I want to know that at the end as well. If you're lost and you don't really know what to do, You should know that all the docs are here. You can tweet us at automaticeng for engineering, and usually me or someone else on my team will reply pretty quickly. We have a contact form on developer.wordpress.com, which we monitor on a daily basis, and we'll respond to any questions. And you can, of course, email me directly if you want to, and I'll have a few business cards available if you want. Some of you may have heard that there's a core API coming. So it's slated for WordPress version 4.1. And it's basically completely incompatible with everything I just showed you, which, which is a sad bummer, but we're going to try to make them co-work together. So what's probably going to happen is the Jetpack WordPress.com API is going to mirror the new core API. So any endpoints that you call on our end will be mirrored to the endpoints of the new API. And eventually we'll phase out our existing one, or keep them both and just continue that you can use one or the other. I'm not exactly 100% sure what will happen, but just keep an eye on this and know that things could change a year down the line. So version 4.0 of WordPress is coming out in August, and then 4.1 doesn't have a date yet, but I'm assuming it'll be sometime in the late fall. And that's when this new core API is supposed to come out. And it does things quite a bit differently. It doesn't do OAuth 2, it does OAuth 1. And the endpoints are all, like, it's a different paradigm than what I showed you here. So it's going to be a little bit dicey for the next few months as we figure out how to integrate the two together.
Do you know if they're going to stick with OAuth 1 going forward, or are they just kind of using that for now to get it going?
I don't know exactly. I kind of follow that project as a, like, hey, it's over here, but I'm not an active contributor in it. So
4.1 is scheduled for December 10th.
There you go. Thank you, Kirk.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Would
it possible to speak that was website somewhere else?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Is it possible to speak the WordPress website somewhere else?
So the question is, can you use the API if the WordPress site is located somewhere else? What do you mean by somewhere else? Like your own hosting? Yeah, exactly. As long as you're running the Jetpack plugin, you can definitely do that. Yeah. And with the new core API, the idea is that you'll be able to do that from any site, not requiring a special plugin. Yeah, Wes?
On a locally hosted site?
Good question. So can you do it on a locally hosted site? The answer is no. Not really. There's a couple tricks you could do. I'm thinking here. No, it needs to be publicly accessible somehow, one way or another, through either a temporary IP address or some kind of temporary URL. It's impossible to interact with it completely locally. In theory, yes, you could. Yeah. Yep.
Is it possible to create an app with your brand, and when people go to the authorization screen, it shows your brand instead of?
Yes. Well, it'll show both. So if we go back to the screen, you can actually see what it looks like. And we're open to suggestions about how this could look different. Right now, it does show kind of the WordPress.com logo as a big thing, and then the cloud logo on the side. For sure, things like this are going to have to stay, like terms of service and privacy policy, because they are connecting with their WordPress.com account. So, but yeah, if you have suggestions about how we can improve this page, definitely open to listening to that.
Actually, is it possible to create your own authentic, like OAuth server?
So the core API will let you do that. That's the whole idea of it. With this one, no. The idea is that we act as a service, as a our platform as a service. So no, it wouldn't be possible to do it. Though we are considering open sourcing more of the server side of the API, but at the moment, no, it's not possible. You would have to do it. The core API will allow you to do that. Yeah, that's kind of the whole point of it.
The API access associated with the user, so like, could you authenticate an editor or a subscriber versus an administrator?
Yes, so the API is aware of the permissions. So whatever permissions they have on the site, will be mirrored in the API. So for example, if you authenticate with a contributor only, they won't be able to publish a post, but they'll be able to submit it for pending review.
So with the new API in the core or the plugin, the second plugin that you were talking about,
Yeah, Jetpack.
who would be, no, not Jetpack, the other one that you had on the screen for just another one? I don't know. Anyway, any of the APIs. Is it possible to get to a point where if I ask for /me, it's the actual user and not the user from WordPress.com, or is that?
The core API will let you do that, yeah. Yeah, because the core API doesn't have a like a middleware. It's you're interacting directly with the WordPress site.
But you can query current user because the current user should be logged in, right? Like if the current user is logged into WordPress.com
and
interacting with the site, you should be able to query that person.
Yes, but it'll give you information about the WordPress.com user, not about the local installation user. Know what I mean?
Yes.
But the permissions, it'll give you the permissions of the local user, but it won't give you the like display name and gravatar of the local user. It might be something we should look at improving, so that you could get one or the other, or some kind of combined output of both.
Have a combined session, JavaScript and the JSON API. So how does that work as well? Like sessions sharing session between the client side, like the browser, through the JSON API to WordPress. Is that something that would come in the new API?
No, as I showed in the last example, it is possible to do it with the WordPress.com and Jetpack API. The only difference is you get a short-lived token as opposed to a forever token. So the user will be asked to re-authenticate on a more frequent basis. Because you don't have a way of keeping the secret, basically. And you have to whitelist the domains that you can use it from for security reasons. Yeah?
When I access data, the data is secret, make some calculation.
Similar to what? To report? I'm not familiar with what that is. Yeah, so you can query posts, you can query comments, you can query custom post types, you can query pages, you can change the theme, you can access information about all the users, you can change the categories and tags. Almost anything you can do within the WordPress admin, you can do with the API. Anyone else? Is there anything that you found that I talked about that you thought, oh, this is cool, but maybe it's missing something, or something you'd like to see work a little bit differently that we could improve?
Can plugins add extra endpoints?
At the moment, no, they cannot add extra endpoints. The most they could do is register custom post types or metadata to be accessible through the API. The reason it's not possible to add an extra endpoint is because the request goes through WordPress.com servers, so it would need to be aware of the endpoints on the other end, which at the moment it's not possible to do that. The core API will let you do that, but it might be something we might look at adding as well. We're kind of proceeding with caution here because we don't want it to get out of control as well. Did you have a question as well?
That was the same question.
Oh, really? OK, cool. I'm open to questions about anything else as well that's development related. Doesn't have to be API specific.
Would it be possible to give a quick demo of using the console?
Yeah, sure. So. Can everyone see? It's loading. It might be a bit slow. Which endpoint would you like me to demonstrate? Anyone?
WordPress site?
Sure.
Zoom in.
Yes. Is that better?
Nice.
Great. So as the site parameter, you can actually pass in either the blog ID or the URL. Both should work pretty well. So here I'm querying my own personal website, and it returns you some information about the user. About the site. It'll tell you the blog ID, the name of the site, the tagline, the URL, obviously, how many posts it has, how many subscribers it has, whether it's a Jetpack site or not. So that's a quick and easy way of finding out actually if the site is Jetpack or not. It'll give you the language that it's currently set at, whether it's a private blog, and whether you, as the current authenticated user, are following that website or not.
So could you do this to a site that is set to as private that you don't have access to?
Let's see.
You have to know the URL though.
Yeah, I'm logged in as an automatician, so I have access to everything. Let me try this in a incognito window. I think it will return the site and just tell you that it's private and not give you any information. But it might also give you an authentication error. I'm not sure. Live demos for the win. So that one I know is a private site. Yeah, it just tells you unauthorized and tells you that it's a private blog. So you won't be able to get any information about it. On the other hand, with this current user that I'm logged in, I don't have access to, like I'm not an authorized user on jkudish.com, and it'll still give me the information about the site since it is a public site. I can also get all the posts for it. By default, it gives you, I think, 50 of them, but you can change that with the number field. And you can also do paging with offset and page parameters. So it'll show you how many you found, how many there are total, and then give you, I guess the default is 20. It gives you the first 20 posts.
In an early slide, you had a place where you showed that you could find out all the information about a site, including what theme it was using, and then a zip file for that theme.
Yeah, so there's a
Can
few.
you do that with a site that's not yours?
I believe you can, yes, as long as the site is public.
From WordPress.com.
Yes, I believe you can.
You might want to plug that in.
Why? Why is that a
Because
hole?
if I buy a theme on WordPress.com, then someone.
Oh no, you won't be able to download a premium theme
Oh, okay.
without having bought it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So if I query jkudish.com and see what theme it's running, no, it doesn't let you actually. Yeah, some of these endpoints I didn't write, so I'm not 100% familiar with what their responses are. But you can also get a list of all the themes available on WordPress.com if you're trying to like create your own theme selector API like interface for some reason. Also, one cool thing that you
active free themes on WordPress.com.
I'm sorry?
That endpoint is all the active free themes on.
Yeah, I think it includes the premium ones too. It just won't let you download them. You should know. You work on that team.
155. It sounds a lot like this free one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be. I'm not 100% sure. One cool thing that that you can do is actually batch requests. So let's say you want to gather information about a user, about a site, and the taxonomies on that site all in like on the same page for some reason. You can actually do that with a single request as opposed to doing 3 different requests, which is kind of neat. This only works for GET requests, so it won't work if you're trying to post data. But it's kind of a neat way to do that. So you can just basically pass it a bunch of URLs here and do that. So I can give you a quick example. Let's do both the site and the posts on it. So I'm passing in the two endpoints that I'm querying, the first one being the one for the site, the second one for the posts. And they're just comma separated. And I'm passing that to the batch endpoint. And there's an error. Why? Oh, it wants an array. So I think this should work. Yeah, I don't know why I can't get it to work, but you guys get the idea. Live demos for the win. Any other endpoints you'd like me to demonstrate? Oh, for Jetpack, you can also manage your site a little bit. So you can query all the installed plugins and activate them or deactivate them. And also get the number of pending updates that there are on the site. And eventually, we're going to add the ability to perform an update remotely as well. And that's, of course, only if you own the Jetpack site that you'll be able to do that, obviously. Yeah, is there any other? You can get a list of all your Jetpack blogs. You can access the WordPress.com reader. You can get the stats from your site, notifications.
Wait, this is stats.
Yep. I don't know if this user owns any sites, so let me just go back to the one.
I think we need a little search bar at the top of that.
There is actually somebody, one of our coworkers is working on that. So that'll be there soon. And also because I'm logged in as an automatician, I see all the endpoints that are being worked on that are not currently in production. So the list is a bit longer. So it gives you the stats as an object and basically a bunch of information about current visitors today, yesterday, when was your best day. Basically all the things that you would see on the stat page, you can query through this.
And can you get this for individual posts as well? Like if you go to this.
No, somebody asked me about that recently, actually. You can't, but you should.
Yeah.
So we're going to add it.
Because that would make it very easy to make some sort of most popular.
Yeah, we're gonna add that. It just doesn't exist yet for some reason, but it's coming. Yeah, it's being worked on. Yeah.
Are there any notable endpoints that are missing at this point? Like anything?
Changing settings is missing. So there's no way to change a setting. There's the media. So there's a media endpoint, so you can actually upload media to the blog, and you can attach media to a post. But it's a little bit hard to manage a gallery, or like how the media will integrate into a post. So I think there's some improvements we can do on that end. Also, the featured image, you have to first add as a media and then set the ID on the post. You can't just like upload it for some reason. So we should fix that. There's like little things like that where it's not 100% perfect yet that we could improve. There's a question in the back.
Well, can you create a custom like URI? So you do a custom request?
Can you, sorry?
Create a custom request.
Can you create a custom request? How? What do you mean by that?
Like site.com/update gender/user ID.
You could, but basically what you would be doing is creating like a proxy to the REST API. So you would receive a request, and then you would still have to send it to public API.wordpress.com/whatever the endpoint that you're trying to update. So you wouldn't be able to just do that. You'd basically be a middleman for the middleman. So you'd be kind of doing a three-way round trip. The Query API will not really let you do that either, actually, because it has its own endpoints, and you'll be able to add endpoints, but I don't think you'll be able to fully customize the URL that they're at least not that I've seen so far. So what you're maybe looking at doing is creating your own API, which has its own advantages as well, because it's custom and you can do whatever you want with it at that point.
involves using a lot of custom rewrite rules, though.
Yes, it would. Alessandro?
My question was, are you thinking about releasing some samples in frameworks that are other than Backbone to use the API, for example, Member or?
One of my coworkers wrote an example in Go, which I don't think he posted yet, but it'll probably be available soon. Backbone's kind of what everyone's raving about these days, so that's why we decided to do an example with it. It was also a good learning opportunity for us because we hadn't, like internally, we hadn't really built a JavaScript application with the API, so it was a good opportunity for us to see what bugs there were, and we fixed a couple in the process. So it was kind of a good learning experience for us. And the way we did it, which was kind of fun, so at Automatic, everyone works remotely, so we're a distributed company. Everyone works from home wherever they want to, and we get together every couple of months. And so we worked on this while we were together all in one room, and we actually had put like a rule that we're not allowed to go and look at the source code. We can only do things how an external developer would. Of course, we do have some insider knowledge in our head that you can't really erase, but we try to approach it like someone who didn't work at Automatic would, which kind of helped us figure out some things that were like a little bit broken in the process, and that we were able to fix up after, which was a neat experience. Dan?
You were talking about the difficulty of like putting photos in a gallery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because galleries are basically short codes in the post, correct?
Yeah, so right now what will happen is if you add media to a post and attach it through the REST API, it'll just add them to a random gallery, but you won't like not a random one, like it'll make it on that post, but you can't control like the size of the gallery or yeah, you can't. So, like usually you can select like whether the gallery is circles or squares or I forgot what the other one is, but so you can't do that. It'll just do the default one, which is like the squares, and not really let you customize anything. And you can't add like attach media to a post without it being added to the gallery either.
Yeah. Are there any plans down the road to make galleries more of a first-class citizen, like their own post type or something like that? Or?
That would be a question for more the core team than me. I don't work on WordPress core directly most of the time, so I don't really know. I think in the API we can do things better so that it's easier to interact with them and create different types of galleries. But yeah, I can't speak for what's coming in core too much, except for the stuff that's already public. I don't think anyone can really, since it's an open source project.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Joey.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing. And thank you for the Code Core? Brightweb.
Yes.
Why did I think Code Core? Brightweb people for letting us crash their space.
Just so everyone knows too, yeah.